Welcome back to another Festival of Legends card review. Today we got a couple new legendaries. We got some new Paladin cards that are freshly revealed, but we're going to kick it off here with Infinitize the Maxitude. This is the new legendary spell for Millhouse, legendary song for Millhouse, 2-mana spell for Mage. It allows you to discover a spell, and then Finale, return this to your hand at the end of turn. So if you're able to activate that Finale effect, then each turn, basically, you're going to get an Infinitize the Maxitude, spend 2 mana, get to discover a thing. Now, notably, there's an important little text line there. This comes back to you at the end of turn. It does not come back immediately. So there's no like cost discount shenanigans with Sorcerer's Apprentice style cards or whatever, where you push this to 0 and you just keep playing it over and over again at 0 mana. It's only going to come back that one time at the end of turn. But normal use case is, anytime you have that 2 mana to finish your turn off, then you can squeeze in and Infinitize the Maxitude and start generating a ton of value. Generated cards also play nicely into something like Romath. So you could set up a big Romath with all these discovered cards, and so on. Now, of course, it's never that simple, right? It's always a little harder than we think to do these sorts of things. So, number one, discovery cards are generally best when you get to discover them at the start of the turn to find something cool to do that is reactive for a given board state that's perfect. Like, oh yeah, okay, I found this Cone of Cold because they have exactly 3 minions, or I found this damage because now I have a lethal setup. It's going to be a lot harder to pick good discover cards setting up for next turn, because you won't yet have known what your opponent's going to do. What are they going to play on board? Are they going to have 1 giant minion or 3 smaller minions? Of course, in Hearthstone, you'll often have some idea of the kinds of things in your opponent's deck, but it's going to be hard to really narrow in on exactly which cards you might need. You're going to have to take things that are generally useful, generally high quality cards, but they're not going to have that same sort of specificity or fine tuning that Discover typically allows, because it's Finale, it's the end of your turn. You're not using this card now, outside of some 0 mana card use cases, I guess. You're going to be using the card next turn, or maybe 2 turns or 3 turns from now, and I think it's going to hurt the quality of the Discover effect more than a lot of people realize, because Discover is best when it's used right away. On top of that, of course, this is just this 2 mana tax you keep paying turn after turn in order to generate resources. Are the resources going to be notably better? Are those going to be the things you want to play over cards in your deck? Because if not, you're paying a 2 mana tax for a bunch of cards that are just kind of sitting in hand and being lower quality than cards you could have run instead. Is a like Romath payoff going to be sufficiently strong to reward all of that mana you've committed throughout the course of the game? 2 mana starts to stack up. I've heard, oh, it's like a hero power. And sure it is, right? But you don't want a hero power every turn in Hearthstone. You don't have to Infinitize the Maxitude every turn in Hearthstone either, but the less you do it, the less valuable this card is, and again, the less reason to actually run it. So all that said, I do still think there could be some grindier, value-y mages who, are willing to give up 1 slot in their deck for potentially a lot of extra value. Because if you get into one of those late game control scenarios, yeah, you're going to need cards, you're going to need to generate stuff, and this would allow you to do that, keep up with some other really greedy decks like Priest and those sorts of things. Just keep making awesome cards on the back of Infinitize every single turn. Now, it's fair to say that a lot of metas in Hearthstone don't really allow for that style of play because they get really fast win conditions, they have high lethality, there's combos that kill you before you have a chance to generate a ton of value. So, as I've said, I think every review so far, this may be better early on in this rotation than later on, because this may have more room to be a kind of grindy value card in a smaller set meta with only 4 sets. May be harder to do that, when 2 more sets come out and more combo decks and more refined aggressive packages come out. Infinitize the Maxitude, it's probably going to get worse over time for a while, but will there be a grindy mage here early on that uses this card? It's possible. I don't think it's going to feel like the best card in the deck, but it might feel playable. So moving on over to Paladin, we're getting a little bit of a Divine Shield package here, and I cannot believe I'm looking at this card, the Funk Fin. Anyway, there's also the Jitterbug here. It's got some Divine Shield synergies, and Spotlight as well, which has also some Divine Shield synergies. So let's kick it off with Funkfin. I think this is really the thing to be excited about, perhaps, for this Divine Shield package. This is a 3-mana 2/2 Murloc with Divine Shield, and your minions with Divine Shield have +2 attack. Now, do note he is a minion with Divine Shield, at least at first. So he kind of starts out as a 4/2. So his weak stat line here, probably not as bad as you think at first glance. 3-mana 4/2 Divine Shield, that's fine. That's an aggressive little minion. Now, notably, if he loses that Divine Shield, he does go back to a 2/2. So that's not perfect, but still a solid minion in his own right, because of course he's got the potential to be a really, really big buff. And we've already seen a bunch of Divine Shield minions successfully land in these like pure Paladin decks right now. You've got the whole like Blood Elf package with like the 2/1 Divine Shields on turn 1. We've got Righteous Protectors. We've got ways to give stuff Divine Shield as well with that Blood Elf package. So I think particularly, like there's some pretty good just like 1/2 curves, a couple 1-drops into Funkfin. That's going to create some really aggressive boards that some decks just get ran over by because they haven't been able to clean up those Divine Shields. Funkfin's value is tied to the life of the Divine Shield in some ways, of course. So if you haven't managed to stick not only the minions but also their Divine Shields, he does get some reduced efficacy in those cases. Like, you're not happy to play him once the Divine Shields are gone. So it might be true that some decks have the ability to kind of manage Divine Shields almost as they have the ability to manage the minions themselves. Like, okay, I don't have to clear everything. Let me just start pinging off shields to kind of reduce the Funkfin fear. But that said, I still think there will be plenty of board states where 1 or 2 Divine Shield minions stick, or you're able to buff something, give it Divine Shield, and then play the Funkfin for some additional buff action as well. So I don't know, this feels like a good follow-up in those sorts of decks, those aggressive Divine Shield decks. This helps you take good trades on board sometimes if you need to, or just push a ton of face damage as well if you need to, because this can hit multiple minions. I mean, theoretically, this is a savage roar of sorts for your board that's of course not sacrificing any development. You're still getting another nice Divine Shield minion down as well. Also some Murloc synergies to consider. I don't think that's something that's super relevant today, but could be in the future if Paladin gets more Murlocs, which they have certainly in the past. So in other words, I like this card. This looks like a nice little follow-up to some good stuff that Paladin's already doing well. So next up here, let's talk about the Jitterbug. This is another Divine Shield synergy card. 4-mana 4/3. It's a beast. It's got Divine Shield, and after a friendly character loses Divine Shield, draw a card. That character's important because remember, your hero can have Divine Shield now, not just minions. We saw that card early on, giving the Paladin hero Divine Shield potentially every turn. So, okay, this is a card draw engine of sorts for a Divine Shield deck. Theoretically, you get a couple Divine Shields left on board, trade those in. The Jitterbug's going to draw you like 2 cards. It's also very often going to draw a card off of itself. This is friendly characters, doesn't say other friendly characters. So with its own Divine Shield there, this might be at a floor, sort of a 4-mana 4/3 Divine Shield, draw a card. I think that's a pretty good floor. Technically, yes, your opponent could remove this with hard removal without activating the Divine Shield. I think most of the time, though, this will probably draw you a card all in its own right. I think this is a pretty good floor. In other words, like the worst case scenario for this card still feels solid to me. I'm not as convinced the best case scenario is going to happen all that often, where this is drawing you 3 cards or something and this becomes this really nice card draw engine. Again, you're giving your opponent quite a bit of control over, like, okay, I got to pop these Divine Shields lest they utilize all these synergy cards and punish me. So that's going to become a little bit of a risk for a card like this one. But also just, it's harder to have stuff on board sticking around on turn 4. And if you do, you're probably less interested in refilling your hand and more interested in a card, like our last guy, the Funkfin, to leverage that into more damage and just hitting them harder. In other words, this works best when you're well developed, and it doesn't really follow up that much on a well developed board from a game plan standpoint. This is more about moving into the next phase of the game. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect in the best case scenario for this on board with the best case scenario for the outcome. Which, that's a pretty specific complaint to have. Because again, I think worst case, this is still pretty solid. I just don't think that home run scenario for Jitterbug is all that often. or all that compelling from a game state standpoint. It kind of flips you in a different direction than when it works best. So, I mean, good card, totally fine. I'm probably making it sound worse than I actually think this card is. I want to make sure that people aren't crazy excited about this one, I guess, which maybe they won't be. I haven't seen any thoughts yet, but just to keep, expectations realistic, I guess. So next up is Spotlight. This is a new tradable card for Paladin. Always fun to see tradable still. 2-mana spell, Holy, and convert a friendly Divine Shield into a 5/5 elemental. So, of course, as we talked about, that could be a Divine Shield on your hero, technically, just taking that free bonus effect from the Paladin legendary spell and turning it into a Divine Shield. Now, on the other side, though, I actually think the most perhaps compelling time to use this is like Righteous Protector on turn 1 and then 5/5 Elemental on turn 2. I think that'll happen. I think there's a lot of times the opponent just doesn't have the thing to pop the Divine Shield on the Righteous Protector, and then you get a 5/5 on turn 2, just a totally regular 5/5, and that's going to help you absolutely dominate some early game boards to start whacking people in the face. That's scary. I think the pop off there, like that 1-2 curve, makes the Spotlight really interesting. As you get later and later into the game, I think this becomes a less compelling play, both because 5/5s are less scary on turn 4 or 5 or whatever, but also because Divine Shields probably have more value a little bit later in the game as well. If you've got minions that are bigger or minions that you've buffed up, if you've got a 4/3 with Divine Shield, you might just rather like trade that in or keep your 4/3 well protected, or if you've buffed it up with some stats and it's, a 6/6 or something. Technically a 5/5 is perhaps worth less than a Divine Shield sometimes, depending on how exactly the board's going to trade in. Not always. Sometimes the Divine Shield might be a throwaway against a mage hero power or something, and you're happy to get rid of it. But anyway, it becomes a tougher decision, I think, later in the game. So Spotlight may not feel powerful then, but it's got tradable. You just trade it off. Maybe I don't really need the 5/5 right now. That's fine. I want to do something cooler. I like my Divine Shields, or I don't have any Divine Shields, so I'm going to trade it off. But then some games, every once in a while, you're going to hit that crazy turn 2, and it's just going to snowball the game and win it outright for you. That feels worth running, when the downside here, I think, is pretty slim. So I actually think this looks kind of scary in an aggro Divine Shield deck, and has that potential as well on the hero Divine Shield stuff too later if you want. So I think this card looks pretty good. So next up here, we got this little rush package for Demon Hunter, kicking off with Halvaria Dark Raven, the new legendary. It's a cool looking emo worgen. That's amazing. 4-mana 4/3 with rush, and after friendly rush minion attacks, give your minions +1 attack. So kicking off some rush synergy stuff like I teased. There's some new rush cards to complement this rush package, and of course we got a few Illidari cards floating around as well to give you more little cheap rushers. So dream case scenario for this, I think, is you have a little bit of board left behind that can go face. You play a Halvaria, maybe you summon even some additional rush minions as well. Those all attack in, they start buffing the rest of your board. You get kind of a bloodlust. They can go face. It's really a permanent bloodlust as well. So if the minions survive, hey, even additional upside. But converting your rush attacks into pressure. Or, of course, if you just want to use it as a board clear as opposed to any face damage, that can also help. It's kind of like the piranhas a little bit for Shaman. It's like I attack in with 1/1 rush. The next 1/1 rush becomes a 2/1 rush. That attacks in. Then that third one or something would be a 3/1 rush. If you had 3, Halvaria has then gained, at that point, 3 attack as well. So she's 7, right? So, you can also use this as like a board clear with some Illidaris as well, helping you trade up into larger boards. That said, that doesn't sound very exciting to me, using like multiple cards and a legendary for this just like really high math input board clear that's still probably not really all that powerful. I don't think that's exciting. I think you really want to be able to convert this into like face damage, lethality, if you're excited to play this card. But I think that's going to feel really awkward. How are you going to have those scenarios where you have enough minions left on board, you have the mana to play both a Halvaria and an Illidari summoner, you have the right thing to trade into for the rush minions to start buffing the stuff that was left behind on board? I guess what I'm saying is, like, at a 4 mana upfront cost on the Halvaria, I think it's going to be really hard to get this into play and feel like this effect is exciting. I think most of the time it's going to create just awkward math, and there's not going to really be enough stuff laying around to make this really good. Or if there is enough stuff, you've spent so much mana that it's coming down way too late, and then the buffs aren't big enough to actually convert into something useful. So anywhere I try to break this down in a game state or a scenario, it just looks clunky. So that said, not every rush card has to be, a Halveria card. In other words, a lot of these cards might be generically good in other decks. I think Security, for instance, has a chance to do that. This is a new 2-mana spell. It's going to summon 2/1/1 Illidari with Rush and Outcast summon one more. The reason I'm a little more intrigued by this card is I think we do have some Outcast stuff coming along that feels like it might be a direction for Demon Hunter that's pretty good. This is a cheap Outcast card and therefore might actually be relevant in that deck. Is it possible that Halveria and this Rush package just kind of are a complementary thing that goes with the Outcast package? Yes. And do you need enough cards to get to 30? Yes. Does that mean Halveria sometimes gets played? Maybe, but I really doubt she feels like the best card of the deck or even a good card of the deck. It might just be necessary to get enough complementary packages in there. But Security is, maybe a linchpin that ties those two worlds together a little bit, because it certainly seems to reward both of those game plans. But ultimately, 3/1/1 rushers for 2 mana probably doesn't feel too bad. Sometimes that's just going to help you sweep up some early minions, get some stuff down, proc some Outcast synergies, and so on. Not a crazy high-powered card by any means. 1/1s just don't do all that much work. Even in combination with Halveria, you're talking about a 6-mana play here with just a little bit of buffs on board. This is the best case scenario for Halveria, right? Is you have 3 minions left behind. You play Halveria and Security for 6 mana. You trade these 3 in, and you get a Bloodlust on your other 3 minions. But that's not a great scenario. Again, I don't think I love that scenario. So but anyway, fine card, I think. Just a generally neat card fusing these two worlds together. Now this card's a little more intriguing. This is the Snakebite, a 2-mana 1/1 Naga with Rush and Battlecry, gain +1/+1 for each minion that died this turn. Now notably, that's not friendly minions, right? That is each minion. So this could be a payoff for a Halveria turn, one of those board clears we talked about. But again, that's an 8-mana commitment now. You're just getting too high. I think more generally, if your opponent has a few small 1/1s, if you play a board clear, we even saw like Immolation Aura come back, right? It doesn't have to be trading in Rush minions. You could play an Immolation Aura, wipe out your opponent's board of 2/2s or something, and then play a pretty big Snakebite that has Rush, maybe to clean up something big, or just develop a decent sized minion. Giving this a 4/4 buff because you wiped out 4 minions from your opponent. It's gonna make this a really solid 2-mana 5/5. So it doesn't have to be crazy. And if you are able to get your own Security in there as well, you play a Security, you trade in 3 guys to soften up the opponent's board, you play an Immolation Aura to wipe it out, you might be looking at a 6/6 or 7/7 buff on the Snakebite. So this actually looks really cool to me, and not just in a Rush support or Rush synergy deck. I think there are some board clears and plenty of reactive ways for Demon Hunter to play that might enable the Snakebite really nicely, since this does not say friendly minion specifically, it's just each minion. I think this card looks pretty legit. And again, I think Security could be a great enabler for this too, because you can use Rush minions as well. Just trade these in, clear a 3/3, right? That's 4 minions killed, and then the Snakebite follows it up, and you've got a 5/5 here as well. So these two cards to me look notably more interesting, I guess, than the actual legendary Rush card. I think these look really, really strong. Or this one in particular looks strong. This one looks pretty solid. And then that's it. Again, finally here with Rush the Stage, we've got ourselves a 3-mana card draw card. Draws 2 Rush minions, and they cost 1 less. And this looks good too. It's just some efficient card draw here. It's a tutor style card draw, so you're getting specific cards. So you might be able to grab your Snakebite and something else cool, for instance, and reduce the cost as well. So in total, this kind of looks like a 1-cost card. Yeah, you pay the 3 up front now, but you're getting that reduction in cost later. So a decent refund on this. Maybe play this on turn 3 and get yourself a crazy swing on turn 4 with some really big Snakebites, for instance. Or you could grab a Halveria as well. She does feel a little better at 3 mana, I'll say. Like, it helps, but I don't know if that's actually the right thing. There might just be better Rush options out there. So I actually like all 3 of these Rush cards a lot better than I like Halveria itself. I have a hard time seeing that one line up quite as well as all of these, but this looks like great efficient draw. This looks like a pretty big potential swingy minion. Also just has epic art, I'm noticing. And this looks like a solid building block for both Outcast and, you know, some token decks. So I like all three of these rush cards a lot. I am not sold on Halveria Darkraven. Infinitize the Maxitude is a 3-star card. Funk Fin is a 4-star card. Jitterbug is a 3-star card. Spotlight is a 4-star card. Halveria Darkraven is a 2-star card. Security is a 3-star card. Snakebite is a 4-star card. Rush the Stage is a 4-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for this review. I'm noticing my hair is quite something today. I haven't taken a shower yet, so bear with me. Hopefully you guys like these cards. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on all these, and what do you think these decks are going to do, or these cards are going to do in what decks? How strong do you think they're going to be? Share all those thoughts and more in the comments below. Thanks so much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.